Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 1242. 1242, September 16th, 2020, Wednesday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about the last 24 hours news regarding Spygate. And again, some of this news talking about today is still playing catch up from when I was on vacation. So there's a couple items I still did not get to the last 2 days. Hopefully I should be able to clear those out today. And there's a couple of new items to talk about here. So first of all, so we are hearing that, in fact, Ron Johnson, I believe himself, has actually said that sometime next week he is going to release an interim report. I mentioned this yesterday. We have a little bit more detail now. And apparently this report is going to show, along with some other things, that Burisma paid a $7 million bribe shortly after Hunter Biden joined the board at Burisma. Yeah, that's pretty damning, and I understand they've got the documents to prove it, that it's a slam dunk. It's not an accusation. It's not just a political, election year tactic. But they have hard evidence that this did occur. And there's other evidence as well that I'm hearing that will show that both Biden's people and Obama's people and his administration were well aware of the issues with Burisma, paying the bribes, and that they knew about all this. So this is a pretty big scandal. It's somewhat related to, of course, Spygate because of, how it's entangled with Ukraine. There's a lot of Ukrainian entanglements within the Spygate story. Of course, the origins, the very beginning, back in 2015, you actually had things going on in Ukraine. I mean, they were setting the stage to come out and be opposed to Trump, the official Ukrainian government, of course, their position. Of course, I think this probably, as corrupt as Ukrainians are, I don't think it was really even personal with Trump or anything else. I think it's just that they are... the Ukrainian government at that time, and probably still to this day, are so dependent on foreign money, U.S. money, that they're easily controlled by the U.S. government, and certainly by the Obama State Department was certainly able to keep Ukraine pretty much wherever they wanted him, based always on the threat of, hey, if you don't, talk the way we want, act the way we want, do the things we want, no money for you. So we controlled Ukraine largely, certainly during the Obama years, and even prior to that, I'm sure, controlled Ukraine by our ability to constantly lure money in front of them and take the money away if they don't say and do the right things. And I think that's what a lot was going on. I don't even know it was all that personal, because the Ukrainian government at that time didn't know anything about Donald Trump. Or whether he would be good for Ukraine or bad for Ukraine. Of course, obviously the Ukrainian government at that time, very much enemies of the Russians, and certainly that faction of the Ukrainian government, enemies of the Russians, and of course the propaganda about Trump, Russia, and all these things, as Trump being friendly with Russia, probably was driving a lot of that. But I still think the majority of, but I think the Ukrainians would, the Yanukovych government would do anything, say anything. I mean, on a dime, flip on a dime, if that's what they were told to do by the U.S. government. And of course, we know that Joe Biden was essentially running Ukraine for the Obama administration. Once his son got involved in the dealings in Ukraine, he should have had to recuse himself from that authority, and he did not do it. And of course, now Ron Johnson's interim report is going to put a lot of these things in the spotlight, and it's certainly, I think, going to have some impact on Joe Biden, and because he's going to have to answer questions about it, because there's going to be a debate in 2 weeks. At this point, it appears that Biden is planning on showing up. I can't imagine that they're going to let him go out there and show up. I think the best thing they could do is wait till the day before and say he's got COVID, and it's going to last until the day before the election. He's not going to be able to make any of the debates. I mean, I would do almost anything to put Biden out on the debate stage if I were his handlers. But it looks like at this point they're still given every indication that Biden is going to show up for that first debate, and we assume the other two as well. He is probably, I mean, Chris Wallace is going to be the first one of the three guys asking questions there. And although I don't like Chris Ratboy Wallace, he's an anti-Trumper, a socialist. His father was certainly a socialist, card-carrying member, actually of the Communist Party. But thing about Wallace is he's just pretty much of an antagonist. And I don't think he'll try to really go hard on Biden, but he has a fairly antagonistic approach to interviewing. And so, and he knows that there'll be millions and millions of people watching. He's not going to go out there and lay a complete egg. I don't think. I think he'll have some bias toward Biden. But if Ron Johnson's report drops next week and it is as damning as it appears to be, then you're going to get, that whole following week is going to be stories about it and questions about it and digging into it. It's certainly going to be a top two or top three things that are going to be topics that Chris Wallace would likely ask Biden about, especially if it's backed up with some pretty hard evidence. It's not just political, stuff. It's not just some loose accusations, but a report coming out of Johnson's committee with documents that can back up what Johnson is saying. Chris Wallace will have a very difficult time not broaching that subject with Biden, asking him about it. And that's when Biden really gets rattled, is when he gets squeezed or pressured. That's when he kind of comes unglued. So I think that that's something to watch for. But this sounds like it's going to be pretty damning. And this is an interim report. As I understand, Johnson's still being stonewalled on a lot of documents and witnesses and things like that. He's having issues even with Republicans on his committee. He won't admit to that, but we know that's true from other reporting, that even Republicans are blocking some things in his committee. And, again, I mean, with Ron Johnson, I generally like Ron Johnson, but just like Lindsey Graham and all the rest, Grassley, I just don't think these guys understand the game. I really don't. First of all, if this were happening two and a half years ago, I could have more support for it. But I guess my question is, why now, after 3.5 years, when we're already been through a midterm, we're on our way to the 2020 election, we've had all these other hoaxes, the Ukraine hoax, the attempted impeachment, and all these other things, and Grassley and Johnson and Graham have really not done a very good job in the past 3.5 years of having these hearings. And when they do have these hearings, they're mostly behind closed doors, which shows you they don't understand what this is about. I mean, they don't have the ability to indict people, charge people with crimes or anything like that. So I don't know why they're doing these behind closed door hearings. The whole point of the hearings is to affect the narrative. It is the fact that they've allowed the Democrats to sit back and completely control the narrative, and they've done nothing to push back. One good thing you could do to fight the narrative is have some public hearings and bring in these accusatory individuals, put them in front of a TV camera, and then ask them some tough questions. It's about the narrative, the fake and phony narrative that's been going on now since Trump walked down the escalator, literally. And Grassley, Johnson, and Graham have had the opportunity to at least ways challenge the narrative through public hearings. But they have not done that. And now here we are, 3.5 years into it. We're almost up on a month away, a month and a half away from the election. And now they're, trying to act like they're really going to tighten the screws. Well, they're about 3 years too late. That's the problem. And it's likely, I would assume, that possibly Durham will finish his investigation before these guys. Well, Horowitz took well over a year to do his investigation. So I think they're late to the dance, late to the party. It's a little too little, a little too late. And again, anytime you do anything this close to an election, it makes it very easy for the other side to come out and say, "Oh, see, it's just a political, it's election year politics." And that's the problem that Johnson's going to have here. He's going to put this out. It could be backed by all kinds of evidence, but the other side's simply going to say, "Well, this is election year politics. Ignore it." So that's why you don't do things this close to the election. He's had 3.5 years, just like Grassley, just like Graham, and what have they done? So, I hope the report comes out. I hope that it is everything that we're hearing it is. I hope that they've got the documents to back what they're saying, and then I hope that in the debates that Biden is finally asked about this in a serious way. So yes, I do think that if this happens next week, that it's going to be a potential heavy hit on Biden, because he's not going to have much of a defense if the documents are there to support what we're being told, which is that Burisma paid a $7 million bribe just shortly after Hunter Biden joined their board. Now, if they got documents to back that up, that's very damaging, and it's going to be hard to spin out of that, especially if you're Joe Biden and you're operating at the mental capacity that he's operating in at this point, which is probably less than 50% on a good day. So I think this one could touch him up a bit, and we'll be watching to see what happens here. And again, Ron Johnson's investigation is very, very broad. He kind of blends Ukraine in with Spygate. I'm not sure why he's doing that exactly. It kind of muddies things up a bit, which is, it's already confusing to a lot of people who don't follow it every day like we do. But we'll see, because he's also announced yesterday that he's going to subpoena Stefan Halper, Stephen Soma, Susan Rice, Samantha Power, Comey, and all the rest. Now, whether or not they actually show up, or if they do show up, whether they actually say anything, I doubt most of them will. I would expect most of them to plead the fifth. I would be very surprised to see Halper show up there. Stephen Soma is another one, especially if right now there's still a focus or a target of the Durham investigation. My guess is that someone at the DOJ, Barr himself, or one of the attorneys working on that, would probably suggest to Johnson that they wait till after Durham's had a crack at these people or something. I don't know. But anyway, that's what Ron Johnson is saying now. So we will see. But again, these people won't be brought into public hearings. They'll be behind closed-door hearings. And again, the problem with that is closed-door hearings, it doesn't affect the narrative. And right now, it's fighting against the false narrative. That's what we really need the action to be. And it doesn't work when you do it behind closed doors. Why you do it behind closed doors, I don't know. Because you don't have arrest authority. You can't charge anybody. There's no, it's almost like they're pretending they're running this thing like they're investigators and prosecutors, when really they're not. They're just politicians doing oversight. Oversight should be done in the public view, not behind closed doors. And this is the problem with all these hearings the Republicans have had. They've all been behind closed doors. Very little. But you see, when the Democrats, when they want to do something, it's always public. They call people in public hearings. It allows them to really control and manipulate the narratives. Republicans have not learned how to win the game. That's unfortunate. That's how we got here in the first place. Now we're also hearing that Marco Rubio and Mark Warner are refusing to give evidence that they collected in the so-called Senate Intelligence Committee investigation into Russiagate. And they're refusing to turn over evidence that's being requested by Grassley and Johnson. So Grassley and Johnson know that a lot of these witnesses that they would like to interview have already been interviewed by the Senate Intelligence Committee. And of course, they just released the last, edition of their multi-year investigation. And really, the Senate Intelligence Committee, their whole report, if you look at it, it's basically David Corn of Mother Jones's book. That's pretty much the Senate Intelligence Committee findings. It's almost like they read David Corn of Mother Jones's book, and that is the guiding narrative for the Senate Intelligence Committee so-called Russia investigation. In other words, it's worthless. It's garbage. And maybe that's why Rubio and Warner do not want to release it to Grassley and Johnson, because they know that Grassley and Johnson will blow up their fake investigation. But it's kind of interesting that you would have a Republican who heads that's Rubio right now, because He's sort of filling in for Barr, who recused himself when he became under investigation for insider trading. So now Rubio is pretty much, the acting head of that committee, and he is a so-called Republican, and he is refusing to provide witness testimony from the Senate Intelligence Committee over to Grassley and Johnson, who are requesting it for their investigation. And, normally that would surprise people because it's, you wonder why a Republican would be blocking two other Republicans who supposedly have the same goal, which is to get to the truth. But what it tells you is that Rubio is a fraud. He's not interested in the truth. He's interested in staying in power. And he knows that if he cooperates with anyone who might do anything damaging to the deep state and to the powers that be in the swamp, that will likely cost him his seat in the Senate. So that's what it's all about for Rubio. It's personal and it's politics. And he's covering his good friend, Mr. Warner, who's got a lot of problems in this regard as far as what he was involved in. Right along with Burr, probably, because he knew everything as well. So that shouldn't surprise us that Marco Rubio is an asshat, basically. Now, here's another thing that happened while I was on vacation, or it might have happened just before I left. John Brennan, Mr. Potato Head, wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post. And he did something that he normally doesn't do, because normally when John Brennan is questioned about things involving Spygate or whatever, he's very vague about things. He never uses the name Christopher Steele. He never talks about the dossier. He never uses these words. He describes Steele. He describes the dossier material, but he never uses the words. Almost like he's trying to play a little game here. He doesn't want to admit that the intelligence, so-called intelligence that he was working with was in fact the Steele material. And he can't admit that because he's already gone out publicly in testimony under oath and said that he didn't even see the dossier until December, and that none of the information that the CIA was using had anything to do with Steele, when in fact it was all Steele. What he briefed Harry Reid on came right out of the dossier, and that was in August. But now we have him in this op-ed, saying in this op-ed, and he gets very specific about the date, July 28th of 2016. Brennan says in this op-ed that he briefed Obama on this material that suggests, or so-called information, intelligence, whatever you want to call it, that the Russians were wanting to involve themselves in the election to help Trump and hurt Hillary, and that he apparently says in this op-ed that he briefed Obama on July the 28th of 2016. That's a very interesting date. A lot of things were going down on July 28th, 2016. In fact, it's actually the date that they made the decision to open Crossfire Hurricane. The date that we get is July 31st, but that's only because the paperwork was officially signed off on by Prestep on the 31st. But the decision was made on the 28th. And of course we have page and Strzok emails and a lot of other things that were going on around the 28th that we know that they were cooking this whole thing up, and that this was something big that they were getting ready to do. And this is what it was. And it's funny that Brennan would now say that he's over there briefing Obama on this exact date of August the 28th, or July the 28th, 3 days before they opened Crossfire Hurricane. He's briefing Obama. And the way I took this when I read it was, of course, it's a lot of propaganda Brennan's throwing out there, the same stuff he always throws out there. But it almost sounded like, again, it sounded like I've seen this before from Brennan. And Clapper did essentially the same thing when he went on CNN and he said, hey, we did exactly, the Russiagate investigation, the person we need to thank is Obama. Oh, yeah, because he's the one that told us to do the IC. He's the one that, told us to do this investigation. So Brennan seems to be doing the same thing. And it's almost like it's kind of a very kind of veiled threat at Obama and anyone else in the group. basically to say, hey, don't any of you talking to Durham's people, don't you try to roll over on me, because you know what? I told Obama everything on the 28th of July. So it's just another one of those sort of, I guess you could say, subtle expressions that we've heard, comments that we've heard from Brennan, Clapper, where they talk about the fact that, hey, everything we were doing was wide open, man. It was out in the open. The Obama administration knew about it. The FBI knew about it. Everybody knew about it. It's all documented, blah, 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 this whole thing. And again, it goes back to what I was saying about a month or so ago, is it's almost a get out of jail free card. Because if your play is your Brennan, your Clapper, your Comey, your Strzok, or any of these people, you can simply look at the Durham investigators and go, well, you think you got all this stuff on me. Well, I got to tell you, I mean, everything I did, was authorized and approved at the very top. The Obama administration knew about everything we were doing, and we were just following, orders. We were just doing what we were authorized to do, and everyone knew what we were doing. We weren't doing anything in secret, So the idea is that what they're all doing is suggesting that, okay, if you're going to indict me, then you have to indict Obama, because we were working under his direction, and I'm going to go in front of a grand jury or in front of a jury. If you, charge me and I find myself going to trial, I'm going to sit there in front of the jury and tell them all this. And what this does, of course, is that there's a lot of deep staters in D.C. Who know exactly what the tactic is that in order to protect Obama, you have to protect Brennan, Comey, Clapper, Strzok, Page, and all these people. Because all these people can expose the truth, which is that everything they were doing was known by the Obama administration at the very highest levels of the government. All knew about it. Everybody who might be charged, whether it's Strzok or McCabe or anyone, can always say, well, hey, the guy above me knew exactly what we were doing. He signed off on it. He approved it. And the guy above him knew it and approved it. And the guy above him. And that's Obama. So every one of these guys, that's what they're going to do. They're going to say, well, if you're going to indict me, then you're essentially indicting the president, or you're indicting Priestep, or you're indicting Comey, or you're indicting the person above me. And everybody will say, the person above me, I was fully authorized. And this is what they're hiding behind. It's like their wall. It's the wall of Obama knew everything. He knew what we were doing. If you're coming after me, you're essentially coming after Obama. And because if you put me in front of a jury and put me under oath, I am going to tell them exactly that. In other words, they're essentially saying, if you try to take me down, I'm going to take down Obama, or I'm going to give up everybody. And of course, there's probably a lot of people very nervous about that, still working at the DOJ, who were involved in this, or at the FBI, or at the CIA, or in the DOD, or wherever, State Department. So there's a lot of bureaucrats still in the game, many of whom might even be working on this case, who it's in their interest to defend Brennan, Clapper, Comey, not because they love these guys, but because they have to protect Obama. And that's the card most of these guys are playing. If you take me down, you're taking down Obama too, because he knew everything we were doing. And that's essentially what Brennan is doing in this Washington Post op-ed. That's, you read the whole thing, it's just a bunch of Brennan garbage. But when you take the long view of what the article really is saying, it's really John Brennan saying, hey, everything I did was authorized. Everything the FBI did was authorized. It was all legal because it came from the president. And if the president directed it, it's legal. And that is kind of a threat to people. That's Brennan saying, if you guys drag me into this, I'm going to give up Obama. And that's exactly what Comey and Strzok and McCabe and all these guys can do. Strzok was in some of the meetings in the White House when they were briefing Obama. You can say the same thing. Well, I was sitting in the White House with, so and so and so and so and so and so. And we briefed the president on everything we were doing. He was running it. He was directing it. In other words, if you're going to indict me, you have to indict the person who was directing it. I mean, you can't get the low-level guys and then not go after the guy who was directing the operation. It doesn't work very well. So that's what I took away from the Brennan op-ed in the Washington Post. And I think that's exactly what we've seen before. We saw Clapper do it when he went on CNN. When he said literally, oh, well, the guy to thank for the Russia investigation is President Obama. Because, hey, he's the one that directed. He's the one that told us to do the ICA. He's the one that, was directing everything and knew about everything that was going on. I mean, that's what all these guys are doing. That's their get out of jail free card, is they can all take down Obama. And that's the person ultimately that the deep state wants to protect. As far as these other low-level guys, if they could throw them under the bus and put this thing to bed and leave Obama untouched, they'd probably do it. They have no love for Peter's been stroking us, loose Lisa Page. It's what they know about Obama. And that's where their security blanket is. And that's where that's where Barr and Durham run into a problem. And that's why it's a sticky wicket. Now, speaking of Barr, as I was talking yesterday about, I have this gut feeling that something is going to happen. Something, I'm not sure what, before October. I think that's the cutoff. I think if Barr and Durham are going to do anything, it's going to be before October, which only leaves us about, what, a week and a half? 2 weeks. And there's a lot of people suggesting that this, is about to happen. The last 2 or 3 interviews I watched with Attorney General Barr, I mean, he makes it pretty clear that, something's coming. And so I was thinking about that. I was watching this interview. It was with a local, I think Phoenix, I think it was a local Arizona Fox News affiliate, local. So Barr must have been in Arizona for some reason. And he was doing an interview with this guy, this interviewer, who seemed to be a friendly, or at least was a straight newsman, because this was a local news station. And he did ask Barr about Durham's investigation. He didn't press him real hard on it. It was a pretty good little interview. He didn't press Barr real hard, but it's probably, I just got the feeling from watching Barr's response there that something's happening here very soon. And I got to thinking about it, and it's pretty unusual for prosecutors. You hear about Durham and you hear he's a total, straight-laced prosecutor, by the book and all that kind of stuff. Most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, when the government or the county or the city or the state or whoever is conducting an investigation of someone using, the U.S. attorneys or state attorneys or whatever, prosecutors, they do an investigation, and if they don't get a grand jury to return indictments, or they don't find slam dunk evidence, eventually the case hits a wall. It just falls off the books. It goes into cold case file, and it's never pursued, and you never hear anything about it. They don't come out and have a press conference and tell you that they were investigating someone, but that they weren't able to make it happen, and therefore they're dropping the case or whatever. You just never hear anything. Prosecutors, U.S. attorneys, generally they do an investigation. If there's nothing there, you hear nothing. You'll never know the investigation even happened unless there's a leak. And they generally don't do reports. They generally do indictments. They charge people with crimes or nothing. Either they charge people with a crime or they do nothing. And but it's not totally unusual in high-profile cases at the federal level to get reports, just like we had a Durham report. We had the 9/11 Commission report. We've had many of these types of things. You see it at the federal level quite often. But my gut feeling is that this case, one of two things: either Durham was not really finished, but has been pressured maybe by Barr to finish it, or it's not completely finished, and so they're just going to kind of do a sort of an interim report. And I would think that John Durham, just from what we have heard about him, would not be very happy with an interim report. I see it as having a lot of problems. If you come out interim report, you're essentially telling people what you know. And as far as the other people that you're investigating, currently investigating or will be investigating, I mean, you're giving them a lot of information you'd rather not be giving them. To come out with an interim report kind of tells people what you know at that point. And it kind of puts a kibosh on your investigation. So I can't imagine that Durham is very happy with having to do that, if in fact that's what they're going to do. So I don't know if this is going to be an interim report, which I'm sure Durham would not be happy about, and Barr probably would rather not do. But it's just because the circumstances were coming up on the election. He's already said he's going to make sure, he said it on public TV with a lot of people watching, he was going to make sure people knew before they went to vote exactly what did happen. So he's kind of locked in now to that position. It'd be hard for him to back out of it. So I think it's kind of a sticky position he's in. As I said, I don't think he wants to drop anything after the 1st of October, because then it gets thrown into that October surprise. Don't pay any attention. It's all political thing. I don't think he wants to go there. So I think there's considerable pressure to do this before the beginning of the month of October. But, as I think about it and I think through it, I think exactly, so what is Barr going to do? Well, he's going to come out and put out an interim report. And what is he going to say in that interim report? I mean, here's the problem. There is already, it's not like we don't know anything and we're just waiting to hear some facts. We already know pretty much what happened. We know a lot of the players. We know their names. We know what they did. We know when they did it. We know about the lies of the FISA court. We know so much about this. So for it to have any real, meaning, there's going to have to be some things that we didn't know. And based on what we do know, there were crimes committed. So I'm wondering, is this just going to be a report? Because if it's just a report without indictments, without charging people, I don't know how that's going to go over very well. Because if you're Barr and you're going to come out in the interim report, we already know there were crimes committed. What's he going to do? Come out and say, well, a lot of things were done that shouldn't have been done, but they don't rise to the level of a crime, so we can't charge these people. But we want you to know what they did was very mean. See, I don't think that's going to fly very well. I really don't. I don't think he can go there. I think if he's going to come out, he's almost going to have to say, yes, there were crimes committed and we plan on charging these people, blah, 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 blah. But Durham, I would think, would have a big problem with that as far as how it's going to affect his investigation. So it's a very sticky situation. I'm trying to imagine how that's going to go. I don't know that Barr can come out there and tell us, well, we found out that they did all these things and we have found they weren't properly predicated. There were things that were done that we determined were illegal. But then he doesn't indict anyone, doesn't charge anyone. He just gives an interim report. I think that's only going to piss people off even more. I guess what I'm saying is that I don't know how Durham he's got one of two choices. Either come out and tell us that there were crimes committed or there were not crimes committed. Bottom line, there were crimes or there were not crimes. If there were crimes, then people are going to be expecting the indictments. So if he comes out and says, yeah, there were crimes committed, but we're not going to charge people or whatever, that's a problem. If he comes out and says, yeah, there were things done, but they weren't crimes, that's going to be a problem. I don't see how any of this helps. We don't need a report to come out and tell us. If you're not going to charge anyone, then by Barr's own standards, he should not come out and put out a report. If you don't have people on crimes, then there was no crimes. Shouldn't be a report, interim or otherwise. You come out, release a statement. Yeah, we had an investigation. The investigation is now closed. We're satisfied. We've looked at everything and we find no criminal wrongdoing. That's it. I'd be very interested to know how he's going to come out, if this is what he does, come out and say, yeah, we found that there was problems, there were crimes committed, but, either no indictments now or maybe there'll be indictments in the future. That would wreck Durham's case. How does Barr come out and do the right thing without wrecking Durham? I don't know. I don't know how that works. It's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens here in the very near future. Keep watching, and I'll be back as soon as there's more news to report. See ya. Bye.